Their lead singer was once friends with Euronymous of Mayhem during the second wave of black metal, and they even had a satanic advisor. They were once arrested by armed guard outside the Vatican for impersonating a priest, and their fans have also been arrested for wearing their merchandise. In the late 90s, the group released a t-shirt with one of the most religiously offensive statements ever made. Despite being labeled as a black metal group early on, they are widely hated within these scenes, which most likely stems from the ever-lovable crowd of black metal elitists. In 2008, Terrorizer magazine even published an article titled "Hating Cradle has always been chapter 1 of Bluff Your Way into Black Metal Elitism." Over the years, fans have given them bizarre offerings such as teeth, first edition copies of Dracula, human thigh bones, and even a skull. And whilst on tour with black metal titans Emperor in the 90s, their drummer Faust confessed to Danny Filth that he had committed a murder, which police had yet to discover at the time. From tales of a blood-hungry countess to the great ethereal creature Cthulhu, this is Nocturnal Supremacy, the story of Cradle of Filth.
All your wishes come true. Season's greetings from your local bottler of Coca-Cola.
Christmas 1986. While some children in the United Kingdom were most likely being given presents such as Lego, Scalextrics, or some new shiny Hot Wheels, for Danny Filth, something a little bit more sinister was waiting for him under the tree. His mother decided an appropriate Christmas gift this year would be thrash and death metal. My mum ordered Rain in Blood for me for Christmas, along with Beyond the Gates by Possessed and Darkness Descends by Dark Angel. And you had to order them from abroad, all through the shop in London, and they ordered them from the States. My copy of Rain in Blood came out in October 1986. It was really early before it was available in England at all. And of course, I wasn't going to let it sit under the Christmas tree unplayed. Fuck me, it blew me away, literally. And it still sounds great today. Danny would have been around 12 years old, which is not a bad age to be when your parents are buying you this type of music. His father, although an avid music fan and record collector, spent his time listening to reggae, not heavy metal. And what makes this even stranger is that he was raised as a Christian. However, the first album Danny actually bought with his own money was by Ultravox. Whilst he did listen to pop music, he always tried to find something with a slightly darker edge to it. In response to growing up with a predominantly Christian background, it was never too bad for me, but I know a lot of people it was stifling, and people were forced to go to communion and church. It was obviously worse for a lot of people in America, especially the Bible Belt. Although a school friend originally tried to get him to listen to the standard template for metal, such as Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden, he quickly turned his attention to what I guess you could call more underground music. And also, like Sabbath, he was a big fan of horror movies. When you're a kid, you're into dinosaurs, then you're into monsters, then you're into monster movies, and they turn into Hammer House horror films and the Universal horror stuff. Then Thriller came along by Michael Jackson, and I saw that it was produced by John Landis, who obviously did American Werewolf in London, and they showed some clips of that, and I begged my dad to see it. And then from there, straight into things like Evil Dead. Then you had the whole X-rated sort of 80s thing going on, where you used to go to these sort of smoky-ridden video stores. They let me rent films like Zombie Flesh Eaters. The same friend also gave him a cassette tape featuring Plasmatics, Overkill, Slayer, Possessed, and Bathory. Swedish extreme metal band Bathory, of course, forming in 1983, and released their debut self-titled record the following year in 1984. Merciful Fate and King Diamond were also on his radar as a kid, with Don't Break the Oath being one of his personal favorites. Danny was also a big Misfits and Danzig fan. My favorite is Danzig 4. I just got a thing about that record. It's great. As for Misfits, I'd probably say the reissue of Static Age. It's actually better than Legacy of Brutality, which was very confusing. It has these confusing dates, timings on the back, and it didn't sound as good as the stuff they found and then re-released, with In the Doorway as well. That's a great record. Danny was in several bands in high school, including the Lemon Grove Kids, Carnival Fruitcake, Feast on Excrement, the Bondage Boys, Hash Gordon, and the Drug Barons. Another early project, PDA, we can actually hear some music for. PDA released one album on cassette in 1989, and it was rough, to say the least. PDA was also the first band Danny would play a live show with, and judging by the music, you can probably guess it wasn't a sold-out arena show. I was shitting myself. It was at a place called the Albion Mills, which is a pub in the town that I lived in England, called Ipswich. I still live there. The pub is no longer there, but there must have been 20 people. It wasn't Cradle of Filth. It was a band called PDA, my punk band, and a band called Edible Vomit as well. And it was mainly friends and girlfriends, but it was cool. You have to start somewhere. Shortly after this, Danny would form Cradle of Filth in 1991, and in 1992, they would record 3 demo cassettes: Total Fucking Darkness, Orgiastic Pleasures Foul, and Invoking the Unclean. These early demos certainly give us an interesting insight into the early world of Cradle of Filth, and soon they would release their first full Evil offering. In 1994, Cradle of Filth released their first full debut album, The Principle of Evil Made Flesh, via Cacophonous Records. Cacophonous Records is a British label founded in 1992 that around the same time had released a 7-inch single for Japanese black metal group Sigh, and the album Decadent Delirium by a super obscure death metal outfit called Psychic Porn. Not that type of porn. The Principle of Evil Made Flesh would also be the first full studio album to be released on this label. A year prior to the release of this record, we saw the 3rd studio album by Type O Negative, Bloody Kisses, and some drew the conclusion that Cradle of Filth copied the album artwork. However, the artwork for The Principle of Evil Made Flesh had already been produced before Bloody Kisses had been released. Cradle of Filth's debut record had been labelled as a black metal record along with the extreme metal tag, and some even say that this album even contributed to the development of black metal during the 90s, which will no doubt royally piss off a lot of the true black metal fans. The elitists. The same year Cradle of Filth's debut landed on the shelves, Norwegian black metal legends Mayhem also released their debut offering. Mayhem were considered to be part of the second wave of black metal, along with the likes of Burzum, Immortal, and Gorgoroth, to name a few. The first wave of black metal started in the early 80s, and most people generally agree that this was due to the fine work of Venom. Then followed by the likes of Bathory, Merciful Fate, Hellhammer, and Celtic Frost, amongst many others. Venom released their debut LP, Welcome to Hell, in 1981, and in 1982 released their second LP, which was quite literally called Black Metal, and Venom were a huge influence on Cradle of Filth. So it's really no surprise that Cradle were labeled as a black metal group early on. Danny was heavily influenced by black metal during the early years of Cradle, citing his favorite black metal records as Don't Break the Oath by Merciful Fate in 1984. Under the Sign of the Black Mark by Bathory in 1987, A Blaze in the Northern Sky by Darkthrone, released in 1992, In the Nightside Eclipse by Emperor, released in 1994, and Mayhem's debut record. The black metal scene came out of a lot of different sounds. It wasn't primarily Nordic. You had Necromantia from Greece, Rotting Christ from Greece as well. You had Necrodeath from Italy, Profanatica and Absu from the States, and Blasphemy. You had Moonspell from Portugal. Even Nordic countries had a vast array of different bands. All of these bands were extremely different from one another. There was no key ingredient, and we were just another band in that vein. Black metal by Venom was obviously the start of it all. So although Cradle of Filth are often mocked in these types of black metal circles now, the fact is they were buried pretty deep within this scene when it was happening, and took a lot of inspiration from black metal music. And Danny at the time was even friends with and writing letters to Euronymous of Mayhem. Short of burning down a church, Cradle of Filth's debut record had many elements of what you could consider to be black metal. However, their sound would develop to cover a wide range of genres, including gothic metal, gothic black metal, and symphonic metal. Another important element they also had and incorporated into their music and aesthetics was the occult. The 1990s would see Cradle of Filth release their first 3 studio albums. The Principle of Evil Made Flesh in 1994, Dusk and Her Embrace in 1996, and Cruelty and the Beast in 1998. They made no bones about their love for the supernatural or shied away from fictional tales of the vampire variety. As I'm sure we all know, such things and the occult had been widely referenced in metal music since its inception, with Black Sabbath, of course, being the first heavy metal band to really embrace occultist themes. Although they weren't exactly Satanists, they were simply fascinated by said topics. I totally believed in the devil. I started reading books by Aleister Crowley and Dennis Wheatley, especially The Devil Rides Out, which was meant to be a cautionary tale, but read like a handbook on how to be a Satanist. Ozzy gave me this 16th century book about magic that he'd stolen from somewhere. I'd put it in an airing cupboard because I wasn't sure about it. Later that night, I woke up and saw this black shadow at the end of my bed. It was a horrible presence that frightened the life out of me. I ran to the airing cupboard to throw the book out, and the book had disappeared. So first of all, let's see if Cradle of Filth are actually a satanic band. They certainly seem to rub Christians up the wrong way, but that's not difficult when it comes to heavy metal. Their debut album could certainly pass for a satanic record, or at least holding an obsession to the occult. With song titles such as Darkness Our Bride, The Black Goddess Rises, and To Eve, The Art of Witchcraft, you could certainly assume they were living on the darker side of faith. And they even had a satanic advisor, a German woman by the name of Andrea Haugen. Andrea Haugen, or her birth name Andrea Meyer, was born in Germany and worked closely with Cradle of Filth for some years. She was a pagan and a member of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. She also published a book on Germanic spirituality and mythology, and is also the female voice you hear on Cradle's debut record. Cradle of Filth did have somewhat of an interest in satanic practices when they started out. However, Danny Filth was, and still is in general, fascinated by various religions, mythology, and the darker side of life. Danny, after all, studied English literature, has written his own book, and has even been working on a poetry book for many years. No matter what religious system, they are all the same. You always have at the top a male god that rules over everything, and his counterpart always seems to be a female version. That's what I'm attracted to, like Lilith, Artemis, Diana. All these female figureheads without which the male counterpart wouldn't exist. They kind of redeem each other. I find that fascinating. Cradle of Filth is largely influenced by topics such as Satanism, black magic, vampires, and the occult, but they don't exactly bless the release of every new album by sacrificing a virgin or drinking the blood of a newborn baby. And to prove how nice they really were, in 1998, they even took someone's mum on tour with them. In an episode of Living with the Enemy that was aired on the BBC in the UK, Cradle of Filth welcomed Janet Robinson on tour with them, and her son Luke, a huge Cradle of Filth fan. Janet, a Christian mother disgusted by her son's love for the band, spends the entire episode trying to understand how on earth her son could have fallen to such darkness. Where did she go wrong? But what probably didn't help their cause was releasing one of the most offensive t-shirts in the history of heavy metal merchandise. In 1993, Cradle of Filth decided it would be a good idea to release what they thought to be just a hilariously funny t-shirt. Cradle was set to head out on tour with Norwegian black metal group Emperor, and thought some new merchandise was in order. Little did they know, it would become one of the most controversial items ever released by any band. It wasn't from a satanic perspective though, it was more of an anarchic statement. We knew it would piss people off. I think Jesus just got picked on because he was archetypal. It could have been Hitler, but it doesn't really work because everyone already thinks Hitler's a so it's not as funny. The t-shirt, which I can't show in full, depicted a half-naked nun on the front pleasuring herself, and on the back, in big letters, it said, "Jesus is a cunt." Several people over the years have since been arrested for causing religiously aggravated offense whilst wearing the t-shirt. This item caused so much of a stir that in 2001, police even stormed a record store in the UK to demand the t-shirts be removed from sale. But due to media coverage, there was no need for the record store to take any action, as the t-shirts sold out immediately. So given all of this, it's actually very easy to see why Cradle of Filth has never been invited to dine with the Pope. Although they did get arrested once outside of the Vatican by armed guards. They were there with Kerrang! Magazine for a photo shoot, and also had a show scheduled nearby with Napalm Death. That was Kerrang's fault actually, because we were doing a feature and we were scouting around looking for a location for the photo shoot. Out of nowhere came loads of armed guards jabbing their guns at us. They held us for quite a few hours and gave us a bit of grief. Strangely enough, it wasn't because I was wearing a tacky I Love Satan t-shirt that I'd just been given, or that our guitarist had a Jesus is a t-shirt. That didn't bother them at all. It was that Lecter was dressed as a priest, and apparently that's illegal there. They're a law unto themselves, and they could have held us for the rest of our lives if they'd wanted to. As we all know, this type of exposure is usually a great marketing tool for bands like Cradle of Filth. It worked for Motley Crue and Slayer in the 80s, and also for artists like Marilyn Manson in the 90s, all of whom faced extensive media coverage and backlash from religious groups, with many religious organizations taking to physically protesting outside of concerts. All this did, though, was encourage the youth of America to go out and buy the records. To date, Cradle of Filth have released 13 studio albums. Their debut, The Principle of Evil Made Flesh, in 1994. And their most recent, Existence is Futile, in 2021. All of which focus on various aspects of mythology, the underworld, and basically all things spooky. Cradle's second studio record, Dusk and Her Embrace, released in 1996, is said to be based around a gothic novel called Carmilla, published in 1872 by the Irish author Sheridan Le Fanu, and from what I can gather, this story essentially follows the life of a lesbian vampire. And this story even predates Bram Stoker's Dracula by about 25 years or so. Then we have Midian, released in the year 2000, a record loosely inspired and based around the 1988 novel Cabal by Clive Barker. Cabal is the story of Boone, a tortured soul haunted by the conviction that he has committed atrocious crimes. In an acropolis in the wilds of Canada, he seeks refuge and finds the last great creatures of the world, the shapeshifters known as the Nightbreed.
Clive Barker brings you a startling new breed of adventure.
Nightbreed subsequently was the name of the film adaptation of this book. Every time I think of this album, it reminds me of the great times we had as a band. Midian marked the start of the post-Dusk and Her Embrace / Cruelty and the Beast lineup, introducing Adrian Erlandson, who is currently in At the Gates. He was in At the Gates at the time of recording, hence the title of the song At the Gates on Midian. It was a little nod in that direction. Great times, new lineup, everything felt like a fresh start. Even if the album was shit, it was still a glorious moment. Nymphetamine, Cradle of Filth's sixth studio album, came with a track-by-track commentary released by Roadrunner Records in 2004. This LP featured another gothic romance and a song about 9/11 called Nemesis, and also a reference to the great Cthulhu, referenced in Mother of Abomination. And if you're wondering, Cthulhu is a fictional deity or cosmic entity created by H.P. Lovecraft, a well-known American author of all things fantasy and horror. Metallica have even referenced this creature in several songs, the most obvious being The Call of Cthulhu from their 1984 record, Ride the Lightning. Yet amongst all of these wonderfully fascinating themes spread across all of Cradle's records, one in particular is a little bit crazy, even psychotic. Cruelty and the Beast, their third studio album released in 1998, this record follows the story of Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who was indeed a real-life countess born in 1560. Released on the 5th of May, around the same time as we were arrested at the Vatican, Cruelty and the Beast had been a painstaking labor of love, a year of intense writing amid ever-growing popularity and distraction. The album's concept of the Hungarian blood countess Elizabeth Bathory, both historically astute and fictionally correct, was to become a dangerous obsession of mine, and one that saw many a first light of dawn working on the lyrics, hell-bent on making the story worthy of her legend. Countess Bathory allegedly tortured and murdered hundreds of young women in the 16th and 17th centuries, whilst her family reigned over Transylvania. Now, medieval people are generally well known for going, well, medieval on people, so this isn't actually the strange aspect of this story, although still psychotic, of course. What makes this super weird is that a Cradle of Filth fan claimed to be the reincarnation of Countess Bathory, this American fan was so obsessed with singer Danny Filth that she even claimed they were married in a previous life and he was a warlord. So even if they were never really a satanic band, they sure did attract the right crowd for it. I think if you ask anyone that knows anything about music, they will tell you that Cradle of Filth absolutely started out as a predominantly black metal band. They certainly played in those circles and were heavily influenced by the music, first and second wave. And I mean, if Euronymous of Mayhem gave your music the thumbs up, then it can't be that bad. However, during their career, Cradle of Filth have received quite a torrent of hate from almost every single scene you can think of and every metal subgenre, with many people claiming the band aren't a true black metal group, whatever the fuck that really means. And of course, it probably didn't help their cause when singer Danny Filth collaborated with Bring Me the Horizon for their 2019 single, Wonderful Life. Where we see Danny in full corpse paint, chowing down on some cereal for breakfast, and doing a spot of grocery shopping. But this is what I kind of love about this band. Cradle of Filth really don't give a fuck. They've never claimed to be black metal, they just do whatever they want to do, and if you watch any interviews of them, it's pretty clear to see they are just as happy to make fun of themselves as everyone else appears to be. In my opinion, which I rarely inject into these documentaries, is simple. They're a fucking great band. Who gives a shit what genre you think they fit into? And I know I didn't talk about any other members of Cradle because this group has had more musicians go through their metaphorical doors than Norwegian black metal bands have burnt down churches. And then there's this interaction with Lemmy of Motorhead and singer Danny Filth. I had a weird relationship with Lemmy. He hit on my wife once. He and his drummer hit on her when she was hanging out with the women in Elastica, I believe. It was quite funny, really. I didn't take offense to it. I thought, wow, that's cool. My wife's just been hit on by a rock legend. We had a big argument in the press that went on for about a year. It ended with me and him having a manly cuddle backstage somewhere. It was in a hallway crowded with bands. Suddenly, it was like everyone else disappeared. Lots of weird things happened. I broke some of his stuff once. I threw his monitors off stage when Motorhead were above us on the bill. It cost me quite a bit of money, but it could have cost me a hell of a lot more. He only charged me the going rate instead of the full whack. He told me to stop drinking, which was ironic, but I took it to heart. Yeah, the world's going to be a sorry place without him. Regardless of what your opinion of Cradle of Filth may be, they are one of the most curious groups in heavy metal, and they're certainly not going anywhere anytime soon.